Welcome to Bendy Bodies with the Hypermobility MD, your podcast to learn all about the benefits and challenges of being bendy. This is co-host Jennifer Milner, here today with Dr. Linda Bluestein. Before we introduce our incredibly special guest, a couple of quick reminders. Please subscribe and leave a review. This really helps get the word out because this podcast is for you. So today we have the great pleasure of speaking with Beckanne Sisk. Beckanne began her ballet training with Longview Ballet Theatre at the age of 5. At 13, she moved to Philadelphia to attend the Rock School for Dance Education on scholarship for 4 years. While there, Ms. Sisk won the Jerome Robbins Award in 2007 and competed at the Youth America Grand Prix from 2007 to 2010, placing first and third. She also won the bronze medal in the Beijing International Ballet Competition in June 2012 and was chosen for the 2012 Princess Grace Dance Fellowship Award. Adam Skloot invited her to join Ballet West 2 in 2010 at age 17. And after 1 year in Ballet West 2, she joined the main company as a new artist in 2011 and then was promoted to principal in 2015. She's performed the female principal roles in Anna Marie Holmes' Don Quixote, Adam Skloot's adaptations of Giselle, The Sleeping Beauty, and Swan Lake, and John Cranko's Romeo and Juliet and Onegin, which was recognized by Point magazine as one of the standout performances of 2019. Original principal roles have been created on her by many renowned contemporary choreographers, and she's a sought-after international guest star. In addition to her dancing, Ms. Sisk was featured on the CW's Breaking Point television show for 2 seasons. Beckanne, hello, and welcome to Bendy Bodies podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. So we are very excited, Linda Bluestein and I, to chat with you about hypermobility and sort of your experience with it. And I would love to know, how early in your dance training did you realize that you had more range of motion than most people? And did you feel like it was an advantage because you were able to make pretty lines, or was it a disadvantage because you couldn't tell when your arms were straight but not too straight? Like how did it start for you in the early ages?
So I don't think that I realized that I was hypermobile and flexible until I would say like 12, 13 is when I was like, oh wow, like this is different. I always knew like with my feet and ankles that they were hypermobile, but not so much like my hips and my back. I didn't really notice.
Right.
But the older I got, or I feel like my teen years, I relied on my flexibility. I thought that that's what separated me from everyone and made me special. And at that time, I didn't realize that that's not all that it's about, So I feel like I really leaned into that and would not listen to my teachers when they're like, you have to rein it in, And I feel like it took me some time before I realized that it was something very difficult that I needed to start focusing on and pulling in, and not just letting it all go.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting that even at that age, your teachers were seeing that and were saying to you, let's pull that back and let's gain control of it, and not necessarily pushing you into it, encouraging you to do more bendier, bigger things. Is that accurate?
Yes.
That's great. So how did your teachers help you learn how to get your hypermobility under control? Were there things that they did that were really helpful? Or certain cueing or exercises? Like how did they kind of help you come to that space?
There was one teacher, Mary Elena Ruiz, at the Rock School, and she was also an extremely flexible, hypermobile dancer. And her way was growing up, going through those school years, I had trouble like listening to people. Like I understood, but I didn't understand how to make changes necessarily. And I feel like when people were really hard and would tell me like, because some teachers were like, you can't do that arabesque like that. Like it's a terrible line, blah, blah, blah. And for some reason that I didn't like when people are like mean about it.
Right.
But luckily I had Mary Elena who she took a different route because I think she could see that that wasn't necessarily working for me. And she was more helpful in the way that she communicated that, you know, you should try this. Maybe this will look better. And she took a more like stand back approach with that, and also would like, I feel like, make me do things over and over to get strength, and then like throw in little strengthening exercises without like being too like aggressive about it. So I feel like she really helped me in that way, and she was easy to connect with because I knew that she had gone through it too.
That makes sense. And that's such an important theme for dancers with hypermobility, is kind of that slow and low burn approach rather than hard and fast and aggressive, is doing a little bit really well and throwing it, like you said, repeating it as long as you're doing it correctly several times and doing little extra exercises, but really taking that long-term approach. And that's fantastic that you had her. She's an amazing teacher.
She is.
She is. And that was a great meeting up of her as a teacher and you as a student. And then do you feel like that has continued as an adult? Like you still kind of get that out of it with that same approach with directors and choreographers, as opposed to the, you know, that's wrong versus the slow and low kind of nurturing?
I feel like I have learned that contemporary stuff, I can let it go and really go into the, you know, flexibility and kind of, you know, twerk things out. You take it, you make it longer, and then distort. Whereas in classical, I have learned that I try to keep shoulders, hips pure, and then wherever my leg is, like, that's fine. I don't feel like, especially in a tutu, you don't want to, you know, be in like a full développé side split. It's just not as pretty. So I have found that in classical, just like more of like a little above 90, unless I'm doing a planche or something, is sort of my goal. And then contemporary is when I can just let it go. And I have found that my coaches and director and choreographers have all kind of understood that. And they tell me if I should go further or if I should hold back.
So you can rely on the people that you work with, to kind of rein you in and to not, so you can just push yourself and then let them tell you when to pull back. That's great. So was there a point during your pre-professional transition to your professional career that you sort of took ownership of your wonky body, or is it something that you've just instinctively done with Mary Elena's help along the way, or how did that sort of adapt for you?
Well, I feel like it was instinct, to be honest, because I got a lot of, in school, there were some teachers that I could tell just didn't know how to work with me and would just be like, you can't do that. Like, that looks bad. And it wasn't in like a helpful, like, that doesn't look good, so let's try this. It was more of just like, that's bad and that looks weird, you know, and I didn't know how to fix that. So I feel like over the years, having all the different kinds of teachers and having them feel different ways about my body, I just kind of put it all together, and I feel like I slowly figured out everything.
So do you find, or did you find, as you were kind of putting all of that together, that, you know, everybody thinks it's such a blessing to have hypermobility because you can let it all hang out, and they think, oh, poor you have to learn how to hold it in, right? Or how to rein it in. But along with that, there comes a lot of inherent weakness as well. So did you find that you were kind of keeping up with the strength as you were learning to manage it, or did you actively have to seek out new ways to strengthen, like cross training and that kind of thing?
I had to seek out like cross training. I love going to the gym. One of my favorite things is lifting weights. I love it. It's something that I love, that you can see your progression so easy. Like, the numbers are right there, you know, so it's like you see and you feel so good. But I found, and that took me, it was later in my career that I realized that that was what I needed to do to get a step up, because I feel like I had been kind of, you know, here, and to really get better and be able to control my body, I needed to start doing something else. And I realized that the gym and lifting weights and just really strengthening my whole body was what needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. So what does a typical week look like for you then, as far as cross training and other types of maintenance, stretching, or meeting with a coach who really works on the small things, or massage, or like what does that sort of look like for you?
So we usually, if we're not performing, we work Monday through Fridays. And those will be about 7.5-hour days,
Mm-hmm.
including class. And I'll wake up in the morning, go to the gym at 8, get to the studio around like 9:10, 9:15. And then we have class for an hour and a half, and then rehearse for 6 hours. Then at the end of the day, I will either come home, and I hate saying, I'm bad about like staying at the studio, going to PT, and like making myself do everything there. I just want to leave and get home. So that's where I usually, like, I get home. If I feel like I need to ice, I'll ice usually my feet, do that, and then just kind of relax.
Mm-hmm. So you like to get your cross training or your physical maintenance first thing in the morning?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. If I don't do it in the morning, it doesn't happen for me.
and that's something for a lot of dancers. Where do they find the time without being exhausted and without over pushing themselves? So that's totally typical. So let me ask, I know a lot of people are going to want to know, you have amazing feet, right?
Thank you.
I cannot tell you how many times my students have sent to me that clip of you and Giselle with the penché and then pressing up into that releve. And they're like, look at her penché. And I'm like, who's looking at the penché? Look at that releve afterwards. Linda, if you have not seen it, you should see it. It's the most amazing strength thing I have seen from feet like those. So, but with feet like those, again, and ankles like those, comes a lot of inherent instability. So do you do regular foot strengthening exercises? Do you do extra ankle strengthening stuff? Like, what does that look like for you?
I usually always before class, I'll do TheraBand exercises.
Mm-hmm.
So like flex foot, like rotating in, out, point, all of that. And then also I just really try and focus when I put my point shoes on, rolling through.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, like, say it's not happening at that time, as long as I'm thinking and like my brain is thinking about it, I feel like it's working my body, whether it's happening or not down there. As long as I have the like mental thought of it, I feel that it helps a lot.
So you just do small little things mentally to stay on top of it, and just basic warm-ups before class. Is it something that's always kind of at the forefront? Is it something that you worry about, like potential injury wise, ankle stability, or are you just like, no, I'm on top of this, I got it?
I feel like I twist my ankle a lot just walking. Like when I'm not in the studio, that's when I seem to hurt myself. But while I'm in the studio, I'm really not afraid of injury. I should knock on wood, but
we'll do it. We'll all do it.
I feel like as long as mentally I'm just trying to work correct and not push myself to do crazy stuff, I feel like you just have to take it slow, kind of, and just be thoughtful.
Yes, I love that. So speaking of taking it slow and being thoughtful, I know that a lot of dancers with hypermobility find that they have to listen to their bodies more than regular or non-hypermobile dancers do, and they kind of have to stay on top of those little small things that they hear and feel, because they quickly become big things. And the big things like tendinopathies tend to take a longer time to heal in hypermobile dancers. So does your hypermobility sort of shape how you approach your work weeks and how you try to sort of set out your schedule and acclimatize yourself to the work and kind of plan it, like self-monitoring and pacing yourself? Does that change how you approach everything?
Yeah. So I find that those of us that are more hypermobile than others, I feel like we get tighter because we're having to use our muscles more to control everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like for us, stretching is huge. Like my calves and my feet, my arches are always cramping.
Right.
Like I just feel like walking around just kills my feet and calves. And I feel like it's because I'm having to think so hard about how to do it correctly and control everything. So I feel like for us, we get a lot tighter and we're a lot more sore.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like stretching throughout the day, whenever you have a chance, always like I stretch my calves.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like anytime I'm just standing on the side, I'm stretching my calves or my like Achilles, the bent knee, plies. But yeah, I think for us, stretching is just extremely important because we do, like even my back, my shoulders, everything. It's just like I'm constantly like controlling with my muscles. So they do just get tighter.
Mm-hmm. And it gets mentally exhausting as well. Just trying to like mentally hold yourself together as you're walking down the street.
Yeah, because it's easier to let,
right.
Yeah, it's easier to let things go.
Right. And it's so much harder to restrain yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so ironic because I think a lot of people don't understand that hypermobile dancers can be tight in their muscles, even though their joints can be, more loose and more hypermobile. So I think oftentimes they don't understand that. So do you have any suggestions for younger dancers in terms of how you stretch your body in a way that's more safe? Because, when you're hypermobile, you can stretch your body in a way that is not going to be helpful. You can end up overstretching ligaments and things even more than they already are. So do you have any certain things that you've learned over the years in terms of safely stretching?
So I have learned that warming up before I stretch is a big thing for me. So I'll try to do, like, for instance, I just do like, a plank on my forearms, a regular plank to kind of start the day. And I'll lift up my back legs like one at a time in the plank. And I feel like that just kind of warms up my entire body. And then I'll go into like stretching, but not like over splits and stuff. It's very rare that I actually do my over splits these days. But usually it's more of just like warming up my body and doing strengthening exercises. But my stretching isn't necessarily, which I'm not saying that this is the right thing. I feel like everyone, stretch away. But for me, I have not continued, like as a young dancer, I feel like maybe I overstretched too much, and sometimes it hurt. Like it just made me hurt throughout the day. So I feel like don't push it too far, especially if you're already flexible. Just warm up and stretch, just do your splits, middle splits, warm up your back and stuff. But sometimes overstretching is not good.
Right. Well, and we have had that conversation as well with other experts who've talked about, if you're hypermobile, we don't want to stretch you further. We want to give you the strength to hold what you've got.
Right.
And so it sounds like you're sort of coming from that same place, which is so wise to me, because the benefit of sitting in an oversplit is really nothing compared to the benefit of finding the strength to hold your splits in your grand saut de chat, right?
Yeah. And I feel like the oversplits, I have never done an oversplit and then been like, oh, look, I can hold my leg, I'm here now. It's more of like, when I do workouts to strengthen my muscles, then I can hold my leg higher.
Right.
It's not necessarily about stretching, it's strength.
Right. Yep. I agree.
Yes. And I love what you were talking about with the TheraBands, because with your hypermobile feet, I think that it's so important for people to understand that when you use a TheraBand, that's not like lifting some big massive weight, but you're learning to control the range of motion all the way, control the movement, all the way through the entire range of motion, right? So with your beautiful, gorgeous feet, I think it's so fabulous for dancers to hear that you're doing these kinds of exercises that might not be super exciting, but they get the job done, right? So, yeah. And I thought it was really interesting when you mentioned that you sometimes sprain your ankles just walking. So can you talk a little bit more about how that happens and how other injuries have impacted you?
Yeah. Well, I find that it's the second that I'm not thinking, like in the studio, I feel like I'm always like aware, But the second, you know, like I take a step outside, I don't see a step, I don't see a hole, you know, it's just things like when I'm not aware of everything, that's when it all goes down.
Yeah. Well, and how do those injuries sort of affect you in class? Do you feel like you come back a little bit slower than everybody else? Do you know how to handle your body and how to kind of get back into it? If other injuries that you've had, have they changed the way that you approach coming back into dance and coming back into a season?
So I have been so lucky. Once again, I'm going to knock on wood. I've only had one injury that has taken me out of a show.
Everybody knock on wood right now, because that's fantastic.
I know, right? Right. But I had, and of course it was a weird one. It wasn't like I just did something, you know, and like twisted my ankle. It was over time, I noticed my right ankle, and I don't know, maybe this has to do with my hypermobility. I never really figured out what caused it, but over time, all of a sudden my right ankle started feeling really stiff. And then the more and more I did, I just quit being able to like go on point, and like rolling down, it hurt. And then all of a sudden I got like this bubble on the top of my foot, and it was like fluid. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I need to, you know, figure this out. And it turns out I just had fluid in my ankle joint. So they had to go in and suck it out, which was honestly like a very easy, I don't even know if you can call it a procedure, to be honest. Just a tiny little needle and like pulling fluid out. But it came back twice again. So it was like, it just continued to fill up. And so now I'm kind of like just waiting for it to happen again. But that's really been the only like injury that I have had.
Wow.
Wow. That I've been really lucky, and I hate to comment on injuries because I feel like I have just been very fortunate.
Well, and I think that also speaks to the people like Mary Elena in your life who have sort of helped bring you along in a really healthy way, and to Adam for seeing your potential and not immediately throwing you into every single thing as a 17 or 18-year-old, but looking at it for sort of the long haul and helping you sort of gradually grow into yourself as an artist and also as an athlete. So you've been so fortunate to have some great people in your career that have kind of shepherded you along with that big picture in mind. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to know about your working with a partner, so, and how your hypermobility might have impacted that. So for example, like, do you have to be especially careful of your shoulder sockets, like where your shoulder is in the joint and that kind of thing? When you're working with a partner, can you kind of safely go to your full end range, or do you kind of have to be more careful because you have somebody else that's, you know, involved in those movements?
You know, you actually, like, hearing this question out loud made me realize that I think the moment that I started realizing that I needed to strengthen and like reel it in was when I had to start partnering more. It's because I think at first I was a very difficult partner because, I mean, there was a lot going on. And I feel like sometimes for those of us that are hypermobile, I think that whenever we're dancing alone, it's easy for us to find our center in a way. And maybe we're probably not even on a real center, but it feels like it works for us. You know, we can like make it work.
We have our systems.
So once I got with a partner, it was no longer like it's just me dancing. I had to find my true center for a partner to be able to manipulate and help. And so, that once I started partnering and when I'm with a partner, I feel that my focus changes, and I just try to be strong. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like a overall just like held.
So you feel like you have to,
can't just,
you feel like you have to do more to be able to give him what he needs to be able to work with, right? You can't just kind of let yourself go and make him responsible for cleaning it all up.
Right. Because they have, yeah, right. That's true. Because they have no idea. It's like, whoa,
Right.
you know?
That's funny.
That is funny. And did you, when you were talking about when you were younger and working with different teachers that maybe were phrasing things in different ways that were challenging for you to maybe incorporate into your body, do you think part of that is because over the years you've had to train yourself how to feel your body? I mean, you clearly now are really expert at that. And I think that's a huge reason why you've had such an incredibly successful career, that and tons of hard work, of course. But do you feel like you really had to train yourself to be able to feel your body, where it is in space and that kind of thing, that you had to really work hard at that?
Yes. And another thing that I feel that had helped me learn from, okay, so hearing from teachers, you know, that, you know, going to your full potential flexibility wise looked bad. So hearing that from them, you know, you don't really understand. You're like, this is, you know, I think this is beautiful, you know, or you don't feel
Right.
that it's like out of whack.
Right.
So I feel like the more I saw professional dancers and the more I watched videos and could see that like a pure classical line was just beautiful, I was like, I understand. So I feel like it was more of like a visual thing for me that kind of helped that. And then also remembering all the things that my teachers had said, it all just kind of came together.
Did you feel when you were younger and you would dance that you looked one way and you kind of occupied space in a certain way, and then you would see a video and be like, wow, that is not what it felt like at all?
Yes, and I still do that. I still see videos and I'm like, oh, I felt way better than that.
I think all dancers are critical of themselves on video.
Yes,
I do.
you can't help it.
But with hypermobility, there's a lot of times a lack of proprioception. And so, you know, I would think my arm was beautifully bent and see the video and be like, wow, that elbow was really whacked out there. You know, just not knowing where your body stops until you've practiced over and over again what that feels like to make that beautiful line.
Yeah. And a lot of coaches that have come in, I noticed like throughout my career, they all are like want to work on my arms, and that's something I never like thought of, you know, because I always thought it was my hips and my legs that were the like crazy mobile things. And then the more and more they're like, no, like, what are you doing? I realized like, you know, I was just like going, whereas it's like, no, you have to hold your back and let's work on this. And then it made sense, but it took me a long time to kind of understand the arm thing.
I am so glad that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people think of arms as like from the shoulder down and don't think about the back and the rib cage and the importance of all of that. And if you don't have a stable shoulder girdle, then you can't support your arms in the way that you need to in order to do all the beautiful things that you want to do. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing that partnering taught me, was like doing a promenade. Like I would just try to, you know, put my arm there, but then it's like, no, like that comes from your back, and there's so much more to it. So I feel like that's what also kind of made everything click. That more of like it's a whole body thing. Like you have to think about your whole body. It's not just one movement, which is just your leg. You know, it's everything. We're connected.
When you were younger, do you think that the whole strength, and I mean strength as in being able to, you know, control and have these beautiful fluid muscles, not, you know, I love that you go to the gym, because I think so many, and now it's more popular than back when I trained, but, you know, I think so many dancers, they think, oh my God, I'm going to get this big bulky muscle. Was that developing the strength? Was that something that really came along over time that you know, I think you mentioned maybe in your teens that's when you really started to realize how important that was?
Well, when I was a young student, I had no strength. And I was like, the gym, like I dance all day. I don't need to go to the gym. But so it took me like, I honestly feel like, because I came to Ballet West at 17. it took me a couple years after I got here. It's like slowly during my first 2 years, I would watch the other dancers, and they were so strong. And I remember being like, okay, I'm missing something. And I feel like it took me a couple of years to realize it's the strength, and I needed to do something besides just ballet. That wasn't going to do it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you've spoken up about having scoliosis and having to work with that as well. Do you feel like issues with, like having the hypermobility and the flexibility have and the scoliosis, have made you a better dancer because you've had to overcome, or not overcome, but really learn to work with these things? And, like with the hypermobility, not just using it, but actually working with it. And, can you talk a little bit about like some of those things?
Yeah, I'm so thankful to have, people, like you said earlier, hypermobility, people are like, oh, that's lucky, which it is lucky, but it takes a lot of work to control.
Right.
And that, between that and my scoliosis, I feel like I wouldn't be who I am or where I am without the work that both of the things had brought me. And honestly, when I started dancing, I knew at the rock school that I knew like I had talent, but I thought that that's all I needed was what I had. I didn't understand that it takes so much more. And I am so glad that I feel like having my setbacks, and with my back, it made me realize I have to do a lot more. And I think it trained me mentally and really made me like focus and work harder, because I totally rode, and I'll admit I rode on my facility for years. And now I'm thankful that, it took growing up for sure, to learn that you can't just ride on that, because you will not get to your full potential.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some roles that you've talked about that really pushed you outside your comfort zone, like Balanchine's rubies, and you talked about all the trunk stability that required. What roles do you gravitate towards and feel really good in your body in?
This is hard. I have to say both, because I always approach new things scare me. So like I'm always nervous when we're learning something new. I just am nervous about it, and I never can like see myself doing well. But it's not until like I have learned it and start doing it that then I'm like, oh wow, okay. I feel like there hasn't really been anything that I have disliked dancing, to be honest. But my favorite roles to dance, I will have to say, have been Cranko's Romeo and Juliet, and then Cranko's Onegin. There's something it's still classical, but it's a little different. It's not like Sleeping Beauty. I have to say Sleeping Beauty is probably my least favorite thing that I've done. But
the truth comes out.
There's something about just like being so free and having a character that you truly connect with. I feel like just changes everything. Just, it's so freeing.
Absolutely. I actually saw you do rubies in Dallas.
Oh, cool.
When you came into Dallas for one of the gala things. And I remember hearing that you were going to do that, and I was thinking, okay, let's see that. Just because I know with your hypermobility, I was like, this will be interesting to see, because it's not classical ballet, right? But it doesn't give you the freedom of contemporary. So you can't go all the way into it. So I was really interested to see, and you did a great job of finding that center, but then also having that being able to go off of it and being able to kind of let everything else go loose. And that it was really encouraging to me to see you do something like that, when what I had seen purely on videos and stuff was more of the classical ballet stuff or the pure contemporary, where you really kind of dive in and let it all go, which has to feel super freeing. Do you feel a difference obviously you feel a difference, but do you dive into contemporary choreography differently than you might climb into full-length ballet like Giselle? Do you feel a difference in the way you kind of approach it and prepare for it?
Yes. So, I mean, for a ballet like Giselle or even Ruby's, it's more of like I need to find my balance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I need to work on, you know, passe balances and just slow, like finding my center.
Mm-hmm.
But then contemporary, it's more about my like weight transfer. So to warm up for, like, say I'm about to run through Giselle, I'm going to do like releves and like passes and really try to find my center.
Mm-hmm.
But with contemporary, I usually try to like do like weight transfer things. So like pushing off one leg to another, and then also like trying to like move and then stand up and balance in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I definitely approach both things differently.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And are there certain roles that you haven't had the opportunity to do yet, but that you would really like to do?
Oh gosh, this is always like the hard one. Because I feel like there's so many that I would like to go back and do, because like my first full length was Don Q with Key Tree, and I had not figured everything out yet, and that was like my first time really partnering. So I feel like I was just learning that the control that I needed, and so I would love to go back and try that again. Because I go back and look at videos, and I mean, I'm like kicking my legs as high, which Key Tree does, you know, like it's okay in Key Tree, but it's like, just, you can tell I'm not thinking, you know, I'm just doing, and I would love to give that a try again.
You probably now have a different sense about like the quality of movements and things like that you could give more attention to that. And actually that's a perfect lead into my next question, which was, what advice would you give your younger self if you could do that?
Oh, it would be listen. Just listen to the people that are trying to help you. The strength, like I remember so many people telling me you need core strength. That was like one thing I heard all the time. And I just didn't understand. I thought, you know, just like 50 crunches before class would be enough for me back then. But it's like, there's just so much more. You have to work like your entire core. And also back strength is just, I just feel like your core and your back is just like two of the most important things. And I wish that I had known that and listened, because so many people told me that, but I didn't understand.
Sure. And what about other hypermobile young dancers, gangly hypermobile young dancers out there? What advice would you give to them?
I would say do crunches, do sit-ups, and planks are the worst, but they're the best. But they really are the worst. I hate them so much, but they're so important. But just strengthen. Stop stretching so much and think more about the warm-up and strengthening.
Could you say that one more time?
Yes.
Yes. Because that is such it's perfect to have this. Yeah. Could you just repeat that again?
Yeah. My advice for the young gangly dancers out there would be stop stretching, just stop and start strengthening. So do your sit-ups, do your planks. That's the most important thing, is the strength.
Yeah. Thank you, all of my dancers listening. You don't listen to me. Hopefully you listen to Beckanne Sisk.
So Beckanne, could you tell us what we should be advising dancers? What do you want young dancers in particular to know when it comes to things like social media? They're seeing all kinds of, accounts that are publishing lots of videos and images, and I think it's influencing a lot of young dancers. And I would love to hear your take on that and what kind of messages that maybe they should be getting instead.
So I know all over social media, you see people posting with their legs, whacked, tilts, crazy things. But you have to just remember, a photo is a second. and you want to be able to do those things. You want to be able to hold those things. So stop stretching and do exercise. It's all about strength. So to be able to get your leg up there, whether you're, contorted or not, it takes strength, not just a whack and then down. So strengthening exercises are so important. And I feel like maybe cut back on stretching and just think about exercises that you can do to build up your body to be able to hold those positions that you see pictures of that you love on social media.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And where can people learn more about you? And I know you have amazing work out there. And what would be the best place for people to? I'm sure on the Ballet West website, of course, but are there certain things that people can find on YouTube or wherever they might be able to go to see more videos and
Instagram account?
Yep, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say I am most active on my Instagram. So if anyone ever has questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm an open book for the most part. But yeah, I've been trying, I know through this pandemic, it's been difficult, but I want to be able to communicate more with the young kids and my audience and just about my experience learning, because I feel like as a kid, I had trouble listening, and that's something that I regret. And now that I've learned, I want to be able to, tell people my story and help. I just want to help and give advice.
That's fantastic. And that's something that I think, is such a gift that you're offering to young dancers that I hope that they take you up on it, because that's amazingly generous and kind. So. Well, it's been so much fun chatting with you today, and y'all have been listening to Bendy Bodies with the Hypermobility MD. Today, our guest has been Beckanne Sisk, principal dancer at Ballet West and international guest star. And Beckanne, we are just so grateful to you for coming on the Bendy Bodies podcast today and sharing so much information and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I feel like I learned a lot, so this is great. I had such a good time.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for listening to the Bendy Bodies podcast. Please visit our website, www.bendybodies.org, for more information and to access the show notes. If you are enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe and leave a review. For a limited time, you could win an autographed copy of the popular textbook, Disjointed, Navigating the Diagnosis and Management of Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and Hypermobility Spectrum Disorders, just by giving us a shout out on Instagram or Facebook and tagging @BendyBodiesPodcast. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the co-hosts and their guests. They do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of any organization. The thoughts and opinions do not constitute medical advice and should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever. We'll catch you next time on the Bendy Bodies podcast.